We are live. I'd like to welcome everyone to this edition of Midweek Mysticism. I think that's the official title. We are learning the Zohar. We're continuing our study of the Zohar. Today, we're going to continue our study of the Zohar on Chidushim, on novel insights, in Nigleh, in revealed wisdom, and in Nistar, in hidden wisdom. And then we'll also kind of get into the flip side. What if you have a novel insight that isn't true? Like we've talked about the great mystical power of good novel insights, but of course, insights are fraught. They're new, so they're not yet peer reviewed by the Academy of Heaven. It's a certain kind of peer review process, and so what happens when that goes awry? So that's what we'll do. And we'll do, if it's okay, what we always do, which is that we'll do the Aramaic, just because there's a linguistic and auditory beauty to the Zohar. But I think most people don't work in, Aramaic from Spain in the 12 and 1300s. So we'll work out of the English as well. So that's what we'll do. Okay. So let me open it up here. Share the screen. Let me just get to the right page, and here we are. Rabbi Shimon. Okay. Just share the screen. So we'll be reviewing a little bit of what we did last time just to get us back into it. And so for that piece, sometimes if I review what we did in the prior week, I might go through a small section of it a little more quickly, but just so that we have working familiarity with where we were. Bereshit, Rabbi Shimon Patach. Does everyone see where we are? Rabbi Shimon Patach. Va'asim devarai beficha. Kama itvei levarnash lishtadla be'oraita yamama v'leila begin dekut shebrichu sayez lekol hon di'inun demitaaske be'oraita v'chol mila dis chadash be'oraita al yadata hu ishtadal be'oraita avid rikia chada. Maybe I'll just read another paragraph as well. Tanan ba'hishaita demilat oraita itchadshat mipume devarnash ahimila salka it adata kameda kuchabrichu v'kuchabrichu natila himila v'nashikla v'atarla b'shivin itrin galifinu mechakekan umila techachmeta ditchadsha salka v'yatfa resha tetzadik chai amen v'tasem mitaman v'shata b'shivin elef almin usligat legabe atikiyomen v'chol milin ta atikiyomen milin ta chachmeta inun berazin stimin ilayin. So we said, and this is a review of kind of a passage we did at the end of last time, as my notes say, but speak up always. Bereshit, Rabbi Shimon opened, quoting from Isaiah, Vasim devarai b'ficha, I have put my words in your mouth. So the pshat, God putting, so the pshat, this is about prophecy. God has put his words in the voice of Isaiah. How vital it is for a human being to engage in Torah day and night. So notice immediately we've taken this act of nivuah and we've expanded it to learning Torah. That's just, no. Engage in Torah day and night, Yamama V'Leila. The Blessed Holy One listens to the voice of those who occupy themselves with Torah. And with every word innovated in Torah, by one engaged in Torah, he fashions one heaven. This is something we're going to come back to, how that heaven gets fashioned. So that's just the kind of almost subject heading. And we'll get back to how is it that this heaven is constructed. We have learned the moment a new word of Torah originates from the mouth of a human being, that word ascends and presents herself before the Blessed Holy One, Kudsha Brichu, who lifts that word, kisses her, and adorns her with 70 crowns engraved and inscribed. But an innovated word of wisdom ascends, and so that's any word, right? Any word. But an innovated word of wisdom ascends and settles on the head of Sadiq, righteous one, vitality of the world. So we're dealing here with two different things. There's Torah and Chokhmah. So Torah is revealed Torah. It's like an insight in the Talmud or in Halakha or Jewish thought, but it's just plain Torah, the regular kind. But mystical Torah, which is described here as Chokhmah, as wisdom, so that settles on the head of Sadiq, righteous one, Chei Almin, vitality of the worlds. This is Chei Olamim in Hebrew. And in the Sefirot system, just so we kind of are back there, Rabbi Comfort, thank you. I hope it's okay. We're using your chart with your different editions. Mainly because when I typed in Sefirot chart, apparently that's the one that opened. So Chei Almin is the Sefira of Yesod. And Yesod, I've been thinking about Yesod as a kind of train station. Maybe this is a good way of saying it. It's the place where all of the energy from the Godhead, from Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, all of God's thoughts above in Chachma, Bina, and Das, or Keser, Chachma, Bina, all of the thought of God that manifests in the act, all of this stuff is still in the Godhead, and it has to become actualized. It has to move from potential to actuality. And so it's all gathered and sorted out and prepared. That's the launch pad for the spaceship, as it were, but the opposite way, and it is the phallus in the kind of sexual imagery of the Kabbalah. But it's the covenant. It's also the covenant. It's the brit. It's the place where we do mitzvot, and God responds to our performance of mitzvot with reward, or the opposite, God forbid. So in any event, the word of Torah, which originates in the sphere of Malchut, because people are living in the world where the Shekhinah is. The word of Torah originates here and descends to the first place one would ascend, right? It's the first stop on the ladder of ascent. Now, it goes from Yesod, Chei Almin, and it jumps up to Atik Yomin. It elevates, it flies. It goes all the way to Keter. Atik Yomin, the Ancient of Days, is an appellation for Keter. That's before God created, before God even had a thought about creation. We can still speak of it. It's the coats, the tip of the yud. It's the very first kind of non-movement of God, as it were, to create. It's the posture of being about to create. It's like standing on the edge of a cliff. You can feel the potential energy at its highest, but none of it is actual yet. Maybe that's a scientific way of saying it. High potential energy at Keter. No actual. So no kinetic energy. High potential energy. Maybe is that so it goes. This word elevates, this word of mystical insight from Yesod to Atik Yomin. Now, just to help understand, what are we talking about? What does that mean? Atik Yomin is before there are words and before there's a differentiated idea. So this idea actually leaves the realm of ideas, as it were, and enters into a pre-verbal place. So the word starts as a word, but it actually gets to a place of knowledge that is entirely transcendent and divine. It starts with a person and their thought, and they work with it, but it goes to a place that has no people. It has God before, as it were, there was a creation. Or what the Kabbalists sometimes refer to as Atu Hu Ad Shelo Nivra Ha'olam, as it says in the prayer book. This is a Kabbalistic, the Kabbalists were very taken by this prayer. You are he who was before the world was created. So that's this version of it, until there was no world. Okay, so it goes to this, the most elevated of places that a word could go. Okay, so but first it goes to Tzaddik. From there it flies and soars 70,000 worlds, ascending to the Ancient of Days. All the words, the Ancient of Days, are words of wisdom. Wisdom here meaning of Kabbalistic wisdom. They're mystical. They're entirely mystical, conveying supernal concealed mysteries. The key for underlining is the stimin in the Aramaic, the concealed nature of these mysteries. They're not yet revealed. They're not known. When the secret word of wisdom innovated here ascends, it joins the Ancient of Days, Atik Yomin. Along with them, it ascends and descends and drink. Oh, so maybe we didn't get to this yet. Let's go to the Hebrew. Back to the Aramaic rather for a second. Vahimi lastimin to chachmatatit chacha chakatsak itchabra bi'inun milin to Atik Yomin. Other version, Derazin da Atik Yomin, the secrets. V'salka v'nachta behadaihu ve'alat b'tamnesar almin genizim, 18 worlds, hidden worlds. Da'ayin lo rata Elohim sulatecha. Nafke mitaman v'shatan v'atjam melean ushlemin v'it'atu kame Atik Yomin. So, when the secret word of wisdom innovated here ascends, it joins those words of the Ancient of Days. Along with them, it ascends and descends, entering 18 hidden worlds, which no eye has seen, O God, but you. Quoting Isaiah, Ayin lo ra'ata Elohim zulatecha. So these are things that are only in the internal world of God. They're not knowable to people, not just God. People haven't seen them, but they can't see them. Why 18 hidden worlds? So just how this flight occurs. Yesod here, we said, is Chei Almin, is Chei Olamim, the life giver of the worlds. It's where God's energy creates the world. And Chei, or Chai, as the gematria, as I think we all know, the gematria of Chai is 18. And so the way it works is that the 18 kind of, so that they're giving a teaching here. Since this is Chei Almin, there are like 18 inner dimensions to Yesod. There are 18 places in that. And by going inward within the sphere of Yesod, there's a place that kind of is able to create a portal. And you can see it's in the middle of the chart, right? So there's a direct link straight through between Keter and Yesod. This is where the vowels, which become the kind of highways for the world of God, become significant. It's able to, through these 18 worlds, to take this road, if we're Google mapping it on our chart, and you can actually see that the road becomes important because you can't go off the road. So I was trying to think about the metaphor of this, and I think the right metaphor is maybe Harry Potter. In the train station there, there's like a track, I forget, something in 3/4, there's a hidden track, there's a hidden way. So Yesod is already the train station, yeah? It's the place where our actions in the world meet God. It's the covenant, right? It's where human action meets God. And so it's the Torah, it's the Ark of the Covenant, it's creation of a child. It's all of those things, and it's being righteous. But because this is the place where our actions meet God, and it's the place where God's actions meet us and come into the world, there's something about Yesod inherently, which is a place of connection and transportation. And so it is like a train station. And once it's like a train station, there are hidden dimensions of it, which are able to, right, all roads lead to Yesod. In, not Rome, but, and all roads lead back to Keter. And so it's in that way that jumping into this, very fundamental connection between us and God, when we meet that place, we're actually able to go beyond just there's us connected to God, there's humans in a moment of spiritual connection, but actually once we hit transcendence, right, moving beyond ourselves and entering into a covenant, which is inherently like I have obligations to others, to God, to observe the mitzvot. I have obligations to Klal Yisrael, to part of the people. I have obligations to the world, to being a human. Once we enter a place of that modicum of transcendence, if we take it to its extreme, and the end of transcendence, we'll disappear and become ayin. We'll become nothingness. Note the play on this even in the Zohar itself. Ayin lo rata Elohim zulatecha. No eye has seen it but you, God. I don't know if this is the pshat, but I think there's a play on no eye has seen this place but you, God, as ayin lo rata could be ayin, pause. Lo ra'ata Elohim zulatecha. The Zohar sometimes misreads verses, and I think this may be an example. Not no eye has seen it but you, God, but it is ayin. It is a place of nothingness. Lo ra'ata Elohim zulatecha. Only God has seen that place. Does that make sense? And I think that's actually how they're reading the pasuk. I couldn't find it in a commentary, so I'm always reluctant to say something about the Zohar that someone else, I can't find it, but maybe it was said. I don't read every commentary there ever was. So I think that's part of it. Okay. My reluctance to say anything new about the Zohar will be emphasized just on a lighter note by the fact that later we'll learn that anyone that makes bad words of mysticism that are unfounded and distorts the teachings causes great demonic forces to kill people. And so yet we're going to get there today. That yet increases my hesitation of saying much of anything, really. Okay. So that's where we were. Now, emerging from there, they roam until they arrive, full and complete, presenting themselves before the Ancient of Days. I think that's where we're at. V'ahishata arach atik yomin b'haimila v'nicha kamei mikola. Natila himila v'atarla v'tlat me'av v'shivin elef itrin. Hahimila tasat v'salka v'nachta v'avida v'kiachada. V'chin kol mila u'mila dechachmeta Kayamin b'kiyuma shlim kamei atik yomin. V'hu karei lon shamayim chadashim. Shamayim mechudashim. Steaming derazin dechachmet teila. V'chal inun shar milin deraita demitchadashin kaimin kamei. Probably need to keep reading. Kamei kuchabrichu v'salken v'tavidu artzot ha'chaim. V'nachtinu mit'atrin legabe eretz chad. V'tchadesh v'tavid kol ha'eretz chadasha mehimila d'tchadesh b'araita. Emerging from there, they roam until they arrive full and complete, presenting themselves before the Ancient of Days. At that moment, the Ancient of Days inhales the aroma of the word, and it pleases him more than anything. So here, this word, you have to imagine, you have created a new mystical insight. Maybe you have created the Zohar, and God is so happy with this. But not just God, the most godly part of God one can imagine, the most non-corporeal part of God, the part of God that hasn't even created God's own inner life, God to God's self, God the introvert. And God smells this word like a fragrance and is pleased. There's clearly allusions here of kireach nichoach, like the sacrifices. And so here, mystical insights become a replacement for the sacrificial system that can no longer exist as a way to bring about the tikkun and the shechina, the presence of God in the world. And also, it's worth noting that in other places in the Zohar, it's noted that if you look at the sin of Adam and Chava, it lists all the senses in relation to the Eitz HaChaim. What does it say about the tree? It was, let's see if I get this right. Is it Nechmad ba'einayim? Is that possible? It's desirous to the eyes, tov lema'achal, something to the eyes. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong on the precise descriptor, but the eyes are mentioned, and it's Tov l'ma'achal, it's good to eat. The apple, the fruit, whatever the fruit is good to eat. It's debate right among the sages what the fruit is. The wheat, fig, I don't know, many positions. It's good to eat. It's pleasant to the eyes. Touch, right? It's touched. Chava touches it. And she mentions, you can't touch it in the whole midrash about touching it. Did God really say you can't touch it? And taste, touch, sight. Am I missing any sense?
Something about a sound?
Sound. The snake. Right, made sounds. The only word not described there, and this is part of the chidush in the places where this is taught. Of course, assuming it is a fruit, most fruits smell fragrant. That's one of the great qualities of going to, say, an orchard, is the fragrance of the whole place. And so the fact that the smell of the fruit is mentioned in no place, especially because you might expect the smell to be mentioned, given that it's a fruit of some sort, subject to debate, means that wasn't involved in the sin. And so smell becomes a sense that is seen as more holy than the other senses because it's untainted by the sin. And so for that reason, in the Kabbalistic system, the smell of the sacrifices, kireach nichach, isn't just an accident or an anthropomorphism, a physical description of God's, so to speak, pleasure at human worship, but it's a spiritual description about the part of this thing which is the most elevated, blending into divine realms. And I think it's undoubtable unarguable that that's why the Hasidim later became very interested in bisamim and mitzvahs on making blessings of smell as crucial. In fact, even adding that to different meals, like Friday night, even Hasidim make a bracha on bisamim, regular. I don't know if people know that. Hasidim do bisamim even on Friday night. There is a passage in the Sabbath where Heschel actually talks about, the bisamim at the Friday night table. And I think many readers probably kind of gloss over that. But that's and part of why the bisamim becomes so important is, okay, so all that was background to say that this pleasant smell in the Kabbalistic system isn't just an accident. Pleasant smell is like the best thing you could say about a thing. And so the aroma of the word pleases God more than anything. Lifting that word, he adorns her with 370,000 crowns. 300,000 are for the 3 sfirot of God's thought, which are considered higher, Keter, Chochmah, and Bina. So that's kind of these, and of course these form the 100,000th place, and these form the 10th place. So they're making a mathematical teaching now about the sfirot. We have the chart, so we're used to the fixed chart, but imagine if you didn't have the chart. So you would think about it in a different way. So one way to think about it is that these 3 are the 100,000s. They're an order of 10 higher than these 7. And so the thought informs action. But we all know in our own lives, thought informs our action, maybe, hopefully. Sometimes we think before we act. Sometimes we don't. So 370,000 crowns, all of the sfirot crown the word, right? So you can imagine the letters of the chidush that you say are crowned by the sfirot. There's great balance. All of them are included. And so any mystical word that reaches that high has to be, we know something about what it is now. Also, it's a total inclusive word of mystical insight. It can't just be one sliver. Words that reach this high, words of mystical insight, have to be total. The word flies, ascending and descending. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, right? This word oscillates between the divine and Shekhinah and Yesod. It flies around. So each and every word of wisdom is transformed into a heaven, existing enduringly in the presence of the Ancient of Days. He calls the new heavens, newly created heavens, mechudashim. So that this is a new heaven. You make a new spiritual realm with this word of insight. It's an interesting thing. It's not just that it has the power to reach, it actually has creative power, because once we get to a place of God before creation, we've now entered a place where, as the Hasidim likes to popularize it, right, with the Baal Shem, Tzaddik Gozer v'Kadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim, in the formulation of Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, that a tzaddik can decree something and God has to fulfill it or create it. So we're now in a place, right, where if we've kind of entered a pre-creation, pre-cognitive state, there's creative power. Golems can be, right? We've entered this mystical world where there are new possibilities. And so the word is transformed into a heaven, existing enduringly, meaning it forever in the presence of the Ancient of Days. It adds to, ironically, that which is prior to creation. It creates new things, even in the uppermost layers of the Godhead, which is the most astounding kind of claim. He calls them new heavens, newly created heavens, hidden mysteries of supernal wisdom. As for all the other innovated words of Torah, the regular Chidushay Torah, like a new pshat in the Gemara or on Chumash or that kind of thing, they stand before the Blessed Holy One and ascend and are transformed into the earths of the living. And so we have here new heavens and new earths. Mystical words form new heavens, but regular words of Torah are not shabby either. They form new earths. So let's discuss this a little more. Now we're going to go back into this heavens and earths, new heavens and earths. The adaptive in Yeshayahu, כאשר השמיים החדשים והארץ החדשה אשר אני עושה עומדים לפניי. So we started with the word of Isaiah, right? V'asim divarai beficha, I'll place my words in your mouth. And now we're continuing. When the heavens, the new heavens, so what are the new heavens for the Zohar? What are new heavens? What do you mean new heavens? New heavens are heavens we create with mystical insight. The Aretz HaChadashah, the new earth. What do you mean the new earth? Is that a book by Eckhart Tolle, the pop spiritual teacher? It is. The new earth, he took the title from this verse. Asher ani oseh omdim lefanai. The Zohar is playing with it. That I make, they stand before me. Now notice, it says Asher ani oseh. Asiti laktiv ela oseh. We'll get to the English, but I almost can't read this without reading it and translating. Ta'avid tadir me'inun chidushim v'razim de'oraita. Yada ktiv v'asim devarai beficha, back to the beginning. B'tzel yadi kisiticha mintoa shamayim v'lisod aretz. Hashamayim lo ktiv ela shamayim. Concerning this it is written, as the new heavens and the new earth that I am making endure before me. The verse does not read that I have made, asiti, lakativ asiti, ella asher ani oseh, that I am making. For he makes them constantly. So the question is the prophecy, what do you mean that I'm making? Is he making it one time? It sounds like God is, because we're supposed to read the Nevuah forever. So what do you mean the heavens that I am making and the earth that I am making? Asher ani oseh. God's always recreating heavens and earths. So what is he making them out of? Out of the chidushim, the innovations and mysteries of Torah. Of this it is written, I have put my words in your mouth. And again, Torah is yesod, is brit. So it's out of this place of insight that comes from the covenant. I put my words in your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand to plant heavens and establish earth. The verse does not read the heavens, but rather heavens. So back to our original verse, Vasim Devarai Beficha, etc. Right? So to plant heavens and establish earth. It says to plant heavens. It doesn't say the Hashemayim, which would imply something fixed, but Shemayim, as if it's like heavens that keep coming. Hashemayim would imply, so why isn't it a definite noun? So the Zohar's answer is it's not definite because it keeps emerging. You don't quite get this in the translation. But Hashemayim would imply that it's a thing. And that if we would call it Hashemayim now, we actually couldn't use that word because Hashemayim now would be different than Hashemayim then because there are new Shemayims because of the Chidushim we've created. So you can't use Hashemayim. You have to use a broad term like heavens because heavens keep changing. It's a term that keeps changing its meaning as the insights are created, you see. And so now we're going to, as we're here with this verse, almost like the Gemara, we're going to like shift this teaching onto this verse while we're on this verse. And we're going to keep moving with this verse now. The pshat of this verse, beautifully, right? I put my words in your mouth. Now also, just a thing about that I should conclude v'asim divarai beficha in this teaching that may be obvious, but I'd like to state it. V'asim divarai beficha, I will put my words in your mouth, God says. This is part of how new heavens are created in Keter for the Zohar, because they're God's words in our mouth. They come out of our mouth, but they're God's words. So that's how they can be creative. God is creating, but they're coming out of our mouth. We're creating them. Who's creating them? It's like the who's on first from before of that we had in an earlier Zohar last year of like mi bara ela. No, mi bara ela. Who created these? Who created these? Who created these? We said who, said the Zohar. It went on like that. So asim divarai beficha, it's working with this tension always between the idea that people with our biases, tendencies, faults, and all the rest, and corporeality could have heavenly words in our mouth. And the Zohar ups the ante, not just that we can be holy and have a relationship with God, but that we can get to the highest levels of creativity. We can, so to speak words that then God will speak. The Ma'orei Naim, the Chassid, sometimes I have this thing lately where I like to, for whatever reason, I keep doing it in teaching, keep noting how the Chassidim worked with these concepts and simplifying them and popularizing them, because I think there's a Chassidic revolution going on. So the Ma'orei Naim has a teaching, as a prominent student of the Baal Shem Tov. It says, Moshe yidaber v'Elohim ya'anenu v'kol. Moshe spoke and God answered in voice. That the way it worked, the way that revelation worked was Moshe yidaber. Moshe spoke words, v'Elohim ya'anenu v'kol, and God just made sounds. That's the way the Ma'orei Naim takes it. So he reversed. The pshat is Moshe spoke and God answered. But the Ma'orei Naim says Moshe spoke words that God just made sounds for. In other words, Moshe took the inchoate sounds of the deity and translated them into words on a kind of rest. So this is a version of that. We create these chidushim in words that ascend to a place beyond words that God ultimately calls his own words and puts his stamp of approval on. Now, the pshat of this verse is that God puts words in our mouth is like planting a seed. The pshat is God teaches us a teaching, not the Zohar's pshat, the pshat, I think. God teaches us a teaching and covers us with the shadow of his hand, and that doing so is kind of like the metaphor here is soil. By teaching us a teaching, God is planting a seed in us, covering us with soil to protect us, to plant so that we'll grow. Right? The soil protects the seed as it is moisturized and etc. That's the metaphor in the prophet. So any as we move on to this kind of next part of the teaching, any questions or comments thus far? All right, I'll keep going. I think these are just tremendous teachings, so I'll just keep excitedly sharing them. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Mahu v'tzel yadi kisiticha. What does it mean in the verse? With the shadow of my hand, right, I covered you. Amar le b'shaitadit masar oraita leMoshe atu kama ribo de malachi lain the okta le bishal hova defumhon ad dechafa ale kudshabrichu. V'hashta daimila salka v'it atrat v'kaima kame kudshabrichu. Yuchafe alehi mila v'chase alehu barnash. Delish demota legabayu ale kudshabrichu. Kanun legabe adit abid miahimi leshamayim chadashim ve'eretz chadasha Hata hu dichtiv v'tzeya di kisiticha l'ntor shamayim v'lisod aretz. Mikan dechal mila tesatim mena saka l'tolta ilah. Hata hu dichtiv v'tzeya di kisiticha. Amait chape v'tkasi mena. Begin l'toalta ilah. Hatu dichtiv l'ntor shamayim v'lisod aretz. Kamati itmar. So Rabbi Elazar asked, what is the meaning? Mahu, I have covered you with the shadow of my hand. So I said the pshat is like planting soil, I think, planting a seed in soil. He replied, when Torah was transmitted to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, myriads of celestial angels came to scorch him with flames from their mouths. I think here in the Zohar, by the way, these flaming angels are like the sun, which could ruin a seed if it isn't protected. I don't know if the Zohar is working with the pshat metaphor or not, but I think it might be. But the Blessed Holy One sheltered him. Now, so what happens? Moshe is getting the Torah, and the angels are coming to scorch him. Why? Kina, jealousy. They're jealous. And when this word ascends, is crowned, and stands before the Blessed Holy One, like we said, this word of New Torah, he shelters that word and covers the person. So notice how easily we fly between Moshe and people. Every time a person says a mystical insight, they're like Moshe, receiving the Torah anew. When this word ascends, his crown stands before the Holy One, shelters that word and covers the person so that he will not be discovered by them, arousing their jealousy. Before that word is transformed into new heavens and a new earth, as it's written, I have covered you with the shadow of my hand to plant heavens and establish earth. From this we learn that every word concealed from the eyes attains supernal value. As it is written, I have covered you with the shadow of my hand. Why was it covered and hidden from view? For the sake of supernal value, as it is written, to plant heavens and establish earth, as already explained. So we have this issue here where if the word is revealed, angels get jealous and then they scorch the person teaching it. Now, we're dealing with part of that. So the Zohar is, dealing with the next part of great mystical teachings, right, which are the secrecy of them, but also the newness of them and the jealousy they inspire. So there may be a polemical claim here, like those angels that scorch with their mouths could be the opponents of the Kabbalah, yeah? The scholars and sages who are holy, who are upset that these new words of Kabbalah that are being revealed, I don't know, but I imagine, I always try to imagine and get into the kind of psychology of it a little. And so you have to hide them. You have to keep them secret so that people don't misunderstand, so people don't become jealous, because really it's about jealousy. And of course, right, with all teachings, any religious thing could make others jealous. Any high spiritual level, others could become jealous of it. This kind of evil eye could, right, the scorching angels could be the evil eye of onlookers as well. That could curse this sort of new creative power. And so God protects these things by keeping them hidden from view. But also hidden from view isn't just a pragmatic to keep people from being jealous, but is of course a description of the highest sphira. Keter is satim, is sealed, is hidden from the eyes. Ayin lo ra'at Elohim zulatecha. So it's both pragmatic, but also there's something about the very nature of the deepest mystical insights which can never be revealed, and which ultimately can only be uttered in kind of silence. And so there's a great tension between a milah, a word, how a word enters to a place of silence or wordlessness, that's at play in this teaching. If that makes sense? Okay. V'lemor leTziona mi'ata. V'lemor le'inun tarinu milin demitzianin, ilin al ilin amiata. Al tikre amiata, ela imiata, lemeve shutfa imi. Mana b'milula dili, avdin shemayim ba'aretz, kama da'at amar, b'devar Hashem shemayim na'asu, uvhachiat. Zakayin inun demishtadli baraita, v'itema demila d'chol barnash, delayada avida. Okay, so we have here to say to Zion, you are my people, from the continuing on with the prophet, to say to those gates, those distinguished words, these above those, you are Ami, my people. Do not read you are Ami, my people, but rather you are Imi, with me, becoming my partner, a shutaf, a business partner, as it were. Just as I made heaven and earth by speaking, as it is said by the word of God, the heavens were made, so do you. Happy are those engaged with Torah. Now, this is a riff on a very famous Gemara in Brachos that Sion, why is Sion called Sion, right? Amiata, that it's for the sha'arim that are mitzuyanim b'halacha, the gates that are distinguished, mitzuyan, excellent, in halacha, in Jewish law, which we're going to get to. So we're now playing with this version of Zion, and the Zohar is going to make kind of other claims about it, launching off from that place that halacha is what this pasuk is talking about. That's even mentioned in the notes. Okay, Brachot 8a. So look what Rabbi Shimon does to that now. Do not read you are Ami, my people, but rather you are Imi, with me, becoming my partner, right? So God makes heaven and earth by speaking, but so do we. So now the Zohar is just making it explicit, right? We, by engaging in mystical secrets, are able to engage in the constant recreation of new earths and new heavens. Every earth that we live on is new every moment in this formulation, and it is the emergence of each new moment's earth and heaven are created by new words of Torah and Kabbalah, respectively. And so by doing this thing, not just study, and this is the key, but chidush, new things. Comparative note, the Kabbalah of the Ramban was very conservative. The Ramban was just in the other part of Spain, very, right, you didn't say anything that wasn't received, and the Ramban would frequently say he was just transmitting the Kabbalah as received him. But the Kabbalah of the Zohar, you see, it's not fearful of insight. In fact, insight is what creates the world. It's the spice of life. Okay. Now, if we're there, though, what's the great concern? Like, this kind of free-flowing insight could lead to all kinds of incorrect teachings. It's very dangerous. It's unvetted. It's non-traditional. Tachazi, hu delav arche, Birazin deraita v'chidush milin delayada al bara'ihim kedekayut ahimila salka v'nafik l'kabe himila ish tafuchot l'shon shaker migo nukva d'toma rabba v'dalit chamesh me'aparse l'kabla himila v'natil la v'asil b'himila l'go nukve Rabbi barakia d'shav d'ikre tohu v'tasbehu rakia hu ish tafuchot shita alfe parse b'zim nachada kevan tahai rakia Deshav kaim nafkat miad eshet znunim va'atkif be'ahu rekia deshav ishtapcha be umitaman nafkat v'katbat kama alfin rivavan begita kakaimat ba'ahu rekia itla reshu v'yachalta lemeve tas kal alma berigachada. So this is where demons come in. Just a plug, our very own local professor, Nathaniel Berman, has just published a book, it's at Brown, on the demonic in the Zohar. So if you're interested in demonology in the Zohar, Professor Berman has just published the book on the subject. So I have not read it, but it's a local, and we can consult him. Sometimes I see he makes comments on the Facebook page, and so maybe he'll see the shout out if he listens to the end of the thing. And of course, if he has any things he wants to add, he is officially the expert on demons in the Zohar, perhaps in the world. And so reluctant in Providence to speak about demons in the Zohar with a world expert on the subject here, but we'll with that caveat, we'll go on. If you say that the word of any ignorant person has this, now maybe anyone, can anyone make these chidushim? Anyone just saying new things and suddenly they're going to create new worlds? Like, is that what we're trying to encourage here? My friend Dan Libenson sometimes calls to this the, what does he call it? The chutzpah versus knowledge curve, the chutzpah knowledge curve. So I'm going to invoke Daniel Libenson's chutzpah knowledge curve. You need a certain amount of chutzpah to say something new, because it's never been said before. So you obviously think that you have some new thing that no one ever said before. Often the people, and so the Zohar is commenting on the chutzpah knowledge curve here, often the people that are going to say something new, the people with the most chutzpah, the people least deferential to tradition, most likely to, so if you're most likely to see something new, you're actually least likely to know what you're talking about. So we have the chutzpah knowledge curve problem if you plot them on two axes. Something to be mindful of. So maybe so the Zohar is commenting on that. Maybe any Amma Aretz, anyone could say something. No, one who is unaccustomed to the mysteries of Torah and innovates words he does not fully understand. When that word ascends, so it does ascend, it does go up. But a man, ish tafuchot, here translated as a man of perversity or of tafuchot, dor tafuchot, right from the Torah. It's a perverse generation, reversed. Perverse. It's all backwards from the way it should be. Lishon Shakar, a tongue of falsehood, quoting from Proverbs. But in the Zohar, Ish Tafuchot is a nickname for, some Kabbalists wouldn't even say the name, afraid to summon the demon, but I'll say it for instructional purposes of Samael, right? So you have the great demonic, if Metatron is the great angel who we had before, the kind of twin is Samael, and his wife, as it were, Lilith, his consort of demons. And so if you say a wrong insight, you actually create, or you empower Samael, the demon. He bursts forth from the chasm of the immense abyss, leaping 500 parsangs. The note here notes it's about 3.5 miles per parsang. If you're trying to figure out what the metaphor is talking about. The point is, it's not a distance to obtain that word. So Samael is extremely excited about this erroneous word. Grabbing her, he takes that word back to his chasm and transmogrifies her into a distorted heaven called chaos. So instead of Shemayim, you get Tohu. You get a chaotic heavenly world. And this Ish Tafuchot flies through that heaven, 600 parsangs in one glide, right? It's a quick, it's easy to move, right? So this makes it's like a highway, just as Yesod created a highway for a Chidush to jump right to Keter, 18 worlds right away. A wrong word of insight makes it easy for the demonic powers to fly around quickly. It's like superpower. As soon as it's I know the Gemara Brachos, and I think the note in the footnote here does say that normally the angels, move in a certain number of steps each. The higher the angel, the fewer the steps. And the Malach Hamav, as the angel of death, takes 8 steps for every action in order to give time for teshuvah, repentance, delay, etc. But during a Shas Magefa, a time of a plague, the angel of death is seen as having an easier time. And so here too, this is seen as empowering that. As soon as the distorted heaven is established, here the Ishaz Nunot, the woman of whoredom, as they translate it from Hosea, Lilith emerges, clinging to it, joining with it. So Lilith is living in this tohu. From there, she sets out, killing thousands, myriads. For as long as she enjoys in that heaven, she's empowered to swoop the entire world in a single moment. So rather than having to take, normally, the point is, the idea is that Lilith or other people can't just go. God makes them act slowly so that people have time to repent or outsmart the demons. But if you say false words of Torah, you empower demonic, dark spiritual power. We're going to end on that note. I think I'll leave time for some comments or questions, and we'll pick this up. We'll pick up here next time about.
And who decides what the good chidushim are and what the false chidushim are?
Right. So who decides? In other words, how does the Zohar know that its chidushim are the good kind and the others are not? Now it does in the text say a few things about that, but it did say that someone who innovates a word that isn't al boryav, that isn't something they fully understand, or al borayu in the Aramaic, right? It's not fully understood. So there's something about the rigorous understanding of a word. In other words, one has to anticipate, what does that mean? One shouldn't just say stuff. There should be some pause and contemplation, which the Zohar is going to get into next time. You have to more fully understand the teaching. So there's an objective measure. Do you understand what you're saying or not? And if you don't, maybe you shouldn't teach it. But I think there's also something about like sages, be careful with your words, that as it says in Pirkei Avos, that there's a sense maybe from full understanding of the consequences of the teaching. Now, of course, it's always hard to know. How does one know what effect their words will have on people, and whether it will lead people to faith and goodness, or, God forbid, some other bad thing? And who decides what's good and bad, especially in worlds of novelty? That is the question. Now, in the last week, right, remember we had Elijah coming to different Batei Midrash. Rabbi Shimon didn't need it, but to others, and giving haskama, or was it Metatron? Giving haskama to this is good. And so they do imagine that, in the mystical realms, angels come and confirm certain teachings. But the complicated thing is that demons confirm other teachings. And Ishtafuchot can fool you. It's spiritual seeming. You could have a spiritual vision that confirms your insight, but is in fact empowered by this dark Sitra Achra, the other side. So next time we'll get into a little bit more of how do we know? It's actually the perfect segue, Rabbi Confer. How do we know? So that's where we'll pick up next. How do we know if it's a good insight or not? Because after all, insights are so incredible, they literally create the world. But if you make the wrong insight, you kill thousands of people in this teaching. So, that could lead a person to paralysis. And a follow-up question I'll ask, would it be best, given the fraught nature of insight, not to say anything new under the sun? God forbid. Or is it worth it? So, how risk averse is this asking us to be, given the stakes being so high on both sides? Now that we've upped the ante, I feel like this is a great cliffhanger. Next week, how will we know? Some more comments and thoughts about tradition, Masorah versus novelty.
I just asked about the schedule because we got an email.
Yeah.
Today's in place of next week. Could you just?
Yeah, next week I have a doctor's appointment that I have to be at this time, and I didn't want to keep messing with the time. So, we're gonna. Today is today. Next week, we're going to take a week off, but then we'll resume every Wednesday, God willing, after that, without any, I don't anticipate henceforth any, we get more consistent. I didn't want to delay starting the class, but there is some inconsistency at the beginning. We get more consistent as we go. So beginning in 2 weeks, every Wednesday, without any known break, we'll meet. Whatever happens in the world, whatever may come, we'll be studying the Zohar. God willing.
All right, maybe your secretary should send out a reminder again because it's a little confusing.
Okay, so we'll send out another reminder. We'll meet in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And people are welcome. If you want me to send you this PDF, I can do that to digest, and review some of what we did. We covered a lot of ground today. Just to review, we covered a fair amount of ground about the metaphysical highways and paths of both Chidushei Torah and Chidushei Kabbalah, mystical and regular insights. And we also talked about how those ascend to such a high place that they take on the creative power of God, the infinite, and come back down again, and how beautiful they are and what they do, and the tension between God's words being in our mouths and how we live that and what that means. But also we began to examine the other side of that equation in mystical terminology. What are the risks of novel insights in mystical teaching, and what are the dangers? So thank you all. We're moving through. We're now about almost halfway through the Hakdama, the Zohar's introduction to itself. So we are actually kind of, they said about the Ari that he was instructed by his teachers to read the Zohar and get through it a little. So we're kind of doing that too. So thank you all. God bless.